guys. Today we are looking at why those young African men or African boys that were born in Europe opt to represent the country, the Western country where they were born in. I mean, those soccer players. You see, as you see in this picture, you see a lot of those young men that were born in Europe by African parents. And some cases is both African parents. It's not even like they are mixed, and they opt to play for the country where they were born in. And before you blame them for doing that, for not representing African countries where their parents came from, you have to be, there's a nuance in this. You can't just blame them for doing this. There's a lot of reasons why these people opt to play for these Western countries where they found themselves, where they were born. There's a lot of reasons why they represent these countries. Because sometimes you might jump to say, well, why can't you represent your father's, where your father came from, like the African countries where your father came from. I used to think that way, but when I look back, and I discovered that there's some big reasons, rational reason to not do that. And because sometimes people think like, people like because you come from one African countries, those countries they feel like entitled that they cannot own you or something like that. But let me give you one scenario. Imagine somebody like this Alexander and Isaac. The parents came from Ethiopia as a refugee, I think in Sweden. And and when they settled down, this guy was born there, and he decided to represent this country. Do you blame them? Because why did the parents left Ethiopia to travel to Sweden? They did that because their country then was in trouble. And the troublemakers there are people that he call his own people. You know what I mean? That's why there's when most of Africans that travel to Europe and maybe decide to settle down in Europe, they do that because of maybe they have kind of maybe war in their country, or they have economic hardship. That's why they left their country of birth and travel to Europe and settle down and start having families there. And you don't expect these people to have a great love for this country where they were born. You don't expect them to have this big love for this country. So that's why there's some big reasons why some people say, "No, I don't give a damn. I'm not going to represent my father's country. I'm going to represent the country where I found myself. I was born in." So you see, there's a valid reason to do that. And another thing is that, when you look at even the Western world and you look at the soccer, this game of soccer, you see well organized it is. So when you look at how well organized it is, you be like, you don't have option that to fall in love with the way they organize this sport. You know what I mean? And look at Africa, even organization in Africa is very poor. So, and these people, they see how well organized, they're attracted to playing for this other, and they start representing the countries, and Africa we continue losing out in these young talents, young soccer talents we have, because we have not put our stuff together, our things together. Once we put our things together, people will start taking us serious. Even our own people like that that left the continent, and some of them they left because things are not working well in Africa. That's why they left, and they don't have they have connection to Africa, but the problem is that they don't have that. You don't expect them to be very patriotic, because the, there's nothing, there's nothing to be patriotic about in some African countries. You know what I mean? Some are in a war situation all the time, and some are mad by corruption, and you want these people to say, "Oh, no, oh, my son, go and represent the social countries in Africa." It's not possible sometimes. Anyway, and another thing is that in Africa, parents have influence on their children decisions in life, but in the Western world, your children, when he is up to 18 years old, he can make his own choice. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's those children that are making this choice, not their parents. That's no, they don't want to play for African country, and they want to represent the country where they're born in, which they are citizens. And the only people that are gonna have problem, well, I have problem with when some people make Africa their second choice. Like if the country where they are born from, like let's say in Germany, if the German football didn't invite them, or they invited them in their youth academy and later drop them, they will now make Africa their second choice. They will now apply to play for African country where the parents are coming from. This is what I don't like about it, because you have to, if you want to go for Africa, you have to make Africa your first choice. You know what I mean? Not second choice. That's the only problem I have. But I don't have problem with people, African countries representing people that were born in Western world representing other. Because some Africans, we have not put ourselves together. When we put ourselves together, people will be happy to represent any African countries they find themselves. Peace.